Hi everybody, my name is Keli Westgate and I'm here today to talk to you about composting. So to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I am a certified permaculture designer. I was certified about 5 years ago in Vernon by Element Eco Design. Has everybody here heard of permaculture? Put your hands up if you have. Heard of it. Okay, so permaculture, just to give you a little bit of a background on what that means, it's derived from the root permanent agriculture, and it's really a design system for landscaping that takes into account care for earth, care for people, and return of the surplus. And so it incorporates things like edible landscaping, rainwater collection and harvesting, mulching, composting, working with nature, giving back to the natural world instead of just taking from it. So it was a 3-month certification process, and you learn about all sorts of different things, and it really gives you tools in your tool belt. So if you're feeling like the world is falling apart and there's nothing I can do, you go through a permaculture design certificate course, and at the end of it you feel very empowered and you feel like, wow, there's lots of solutions, there's plenty of things, let's get to work, and you want to just shout it from the mountaintops and preach it to everybody. So composting is one of the areas that really sort of sparked my interest when I got into permaculture, and I'm going to get into a bunch of the reasons why. But just to get a show of hands too here, how many of you are already composting? Okay, so why are you here? It is. Thank you. I love it. Tips of the trade. Excellent. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different styles of composting because there are many, many ways to do it, and it's just finding the right one for you. Hello. So obviously this is not going to, for you that were at the event last weekend, you're going to see the same slides. I'm just going to pull it a lot longer today. So obviously you're all already composting, which is great. I'm sure you all have your own methods, and different people have recipes that they like to use, or maybe they've run into some troubles. So when I get to the end of the presentation, I'll take all of your troubleshooting questions, and if you're like, you'll probably hear about something that you're doing wrong in this presentation or what you could do better. So let's get into, first of all, I like to really sort of describe on a nerdy scientific level what composting is. So to use the big words, it's the final product of a managed thermophilic process through which microorganisms break down organic material into forms suitable for beneficial application to the soil. So the important word here, maybe that people don't know so much, is thermophilic. In composting, you can do hot composting or you can do cold composting. Probably if you're doing it at home, you're doing a cold compost method, which means that you're not controlling the temperature of it. You're putting things into a pile, you're mixing in your nitrogens and carbons, and just letting it do its thing. So thermophilic is really about the temperature. So certain microorganisms work at certain temperatures. So if you're doing it at home, you're probably mesophilic. And then thermophilic is when the temperature goes up. So at different temperatures, different bugs are doing different jobs. And when we go into a different level, then these ones die off and these ones come in and take over the work and continue doing that. So that's thermophilic and mesophilic. But really the reason I think that we all get so excited about this is because it does all of these things for us and more. It makes healthy soil, helps us hold water in the soil, helps prevent waste. Not only preventing waste, but really the words that we use around composting, we use food waste as though it's like, ugh, let's get rid of that. It's not something that we need. And within the industry now, we're really starting to rebrand it as food scraps, and food scraps as a resource, because these are a resource, and we've been keeping all that organic material out of the soil, putting it up at the landfill where it creates methane. And so methane, obviously a very harmful greenhouse gas that we want to try to avoid creating if we can. So it's easy to love compost. But what does happen at the landfill is you've got all of these organic and non-organic materials mixing together, and so that does create that gas. It goes into the air, obviously creates particulates in the air, and is a harmful gas. Some, for instance, in Kelowna, they are doing a methane capture system at the landfill. So that is also a type of composting where they're just basically capping the landfill and taking the gas and using it and selling that to FortisBC to sell for natural gas, because natural gas is methane. So methane is also what's released in fracking or hydraulic fracturing for the LNG companies. So they call it liquefied natural gas, but basically that's methane. So same thing. Yes?
So is it the compost in the garbage that's creating and the combination of the two that's creating the methane?
It's the mix of organic and non-organic materials. That's.
We're like organizing, sorting all of our recycling and blah, 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 blah. Like, why couldn't people who collect garbage just say, don't put organic material in your garbage, put it in this bin?
It's coming. It's coming. We're, the cities are on this. Vancouver's doing it on a wide scale. Calgary's doing it on a wide scale. The regional district here has just announced that they are looking at it for the RDNO as well. And there's a couple different things about that I will get into, but collecting all of that from everybody and sending a truck around to gather everybody's organic material is also creating greenhouse gases from the trucking. And so it's a kind of not a catch-22, but there are some better ways to do it. So although I work for Spa Hills Compost, which is a commercial compost facility, I'm going to be talking about your home composting methods today and those potentials. But I will also mention the difference between home composting and commercial composting, because there is a difference as to what you can put in the bin, how long it takes, that type of thing. Important to note with the home compost is aerobic decomposition. So aerobic means we have to be turning it. So that's one of the big mistakes that I see people doing with their home compost, is they're not turning it enough. So you do need to get some air in there. You need to get some airflow, and that's going to help things heat up. And that's also the reason that you're going to want to put wood chips in there. You got to create little air pockets for all those little beneficial organisms to do their work.
How often do you turn?
In a perfect world, you would turn every week, but I'm pretty hardcore, and I still am lucky if I get to it once a month. So you do the best you can. Some composting is better than no composting, but the more you do, you don't want to be turning it every day. You don't want to be over managing your pile, and not that anybody's going to be out there turning it every day. I know that. Once a week is lots. Every 2 weeks is still good. So it's just going to take longer if you're not turning it. So if you just leave it to sit, you'll just have to have more patience, which some of us gardeners don't have. I bring up this book because this, the carbon cycle is part of composting as well. There's actually a table upstairs a gentleman is doing, talking on biochar. And biochar is a way of carbon sequestration. So you're basically taking carbon out of the air through a tree. You're sinking that carbon into the ground, or then you're burning it at a high level, high temperature, 700 degrees, with no oxygen. And it's called a pyrolysis flame. And if you mix that biochar, that finished material, with a compost, for example, they're a perfect marriage, because the porosity of the wood that's burned in a pyrolysis cooker leaves these perfect little holes, which are homes for all of those microbes and nematodes. And when you mix a biochar and a compost, it's like an inoculation, basically. So it's charging the biochar with all of those good little critters, and then you put that into your soil. So ideally, if you were going to use something like a biochar, mix it with a compost at about 5 to 10%, and then let it sit for 3 weeks so it can all mix together and do its thing, and then put it on your soil. And then that carbon will stay in your soil for hundreds of years. But this is a great book if you're looking at, it's a very textbooky book if you're looking at doing regenerative agriculture, which is a big part of permaculture. So it's going beyond sustainability and looking at how do we give back? How do we make things better, not just keep doing what we're doing? So this is a big buzzword lately, is the regenerative agriculture. And then, a lot of us farm, and this is a very traditional thing. We burn our waste at the farm in the fall or in the spring. But, this is also, as you can see, we're very used to smoky skies here in the Okanagan and the Shuswap now. there's a better way to do this. So this, to me, all I see is a big pile of carbon. I see this as potential wood chips for my compost pile, and this just seems like a huge waste. So this is gonna go up, it's gonna bump around, hit all the mountains, and just sit in the valley and choke us. So the best thing to do with this pile would be to get a chipper or find a friend with a chipper, chip it right down into small pieces, and then just have a bucket of this beside your compost pile and throw in a couple handfuls every time you throw food waste in, and give it a stir, because you do need that carbon. So this is harmful and wasteful, and we can do better than this. So as I talk about carbon and nitrogen, most people know, I mean, this is all your food waste that's going to go into your compost bin. So, you know, coffee grinds and plants, and you can even put human hair in there, your grass clippings and whatnot. Those are all your nitrogens. And then these are all your carbons. So you can use shredded newspaper is a great one. We get free newspapers here. Dried grass, you can use some wood ash in there, you can tear up your toilet paper rolls or your pizza boxes, and those are great carbons. So in your home pile, you do want to make sure your carbon's always on the top. So if you've added food waste, put some shredded newspaper on the top. That's going to contain your smells, it's going to keep any, you know, potential critters out of there. So that's one thing I do here. You know, a lot of if there's naysaying about compost, it's like, well, I tried it and it didn't work, or it attracted pests. And I guarantee they were either not adding enough carbon or not turning it. Those are the two most common problems with your compost. So you do need to make sure that you're aerating it and you have enough of your browns. These are your browns, these are your greens. Okay. And I am noticing a real shift in this lately. You know, it used to be that I had to bang people over the head with composting, and in the last 6 months, there's just been a consciousness shift, and people get it, and they want it, and they're demanding it. I'm a big believer in decentralization of your compost. So yes, we can pick it up and we can take it to our facility and process it for you, but if you have the capability to do it at home, then why wouldn't you, especially if you're a gardener? I mean, this is a free resource. You're going to be buying bags of compost to put in your ground anyway. So if you're doing it at home, you're not creating plastic waste from those plastic bags. You know exactly what's gone into the compost, and you're taking charge of your waste and making a positive difference. So I'm going to go through a couple different ways that are, you know, a few different ways. We're going to stay away from the larger commercial industrial size compost. It's going to do with what you do here at home. So this is sort of your entry-level composter. This is just one version of a worm bin. There's lots of different ones. They have tiered ones that you can use where basically you take your food waste, you put it on the top, the worms kind of do their thing, and then you're constantly moving them up as the material falls down. So this is how I got started with composting in the city. Nice bite size, but you can only do about 1 liter a week in a worm bin. So, and you do need worms. So with these ones, you would sort of put some bedding in the bottom, so a mix of straw and shredded newspaper. You would get some red wiggler worms. There's a very specific type of worm that you would use for this, and there is a gentleman by the name of Bud O'Connell who lives out on West Side Road who sells worms by the pound, so you can get a pound of worms for I think $25. And then you're going to have some more bedding. So what you're going to do with these is you're going to reach into the corner, you're going to lift up some of the bedding, you're going to put your 1 liter of hopefully chopped small food waste into there, and then you're going to cover it. And then the following week, you're going to pick up the next corner and you're going to work your way around, and by the time 4 weeks have passed and you get back to that original corner, they should have done a really good job breaking that down. So one thing to remember about worms is that they have very small mouths. So we need to get that material chopped nice and small. It will go a lot faster if you can. The other thing is to feed your worms what they like. So different people have different opinions on this, but I personally don't put any onion peels or citrus fruits. It creates more of an acidic environment that the worms don't care for. But I do know people that throw that stuff in and they say it's fine. But yeah, and
how about spices?
How about spices? Do you mean on cooked food or just gonna shake some spices? A little bit of cayenne. I generally don't recommend putting cooked food in a worm bin. It's because of the grains, you're just more susceptible to other pests that you don't want if you're putting cooked food in there. So ideally, it's just your vegetables, your eggshells, your coffee grinds, your tea bags, chopped up nice and fine. But again, it's an experiment, so try things. And if it doesn't work, you know, you might be out $25 in worms, but you can always get a new bag of worms. And they will procreate, and there'll be lots more worms, and you'll be able to divide them between your friends in the future. Be very popular. If you have friends like me. This is the bokashi system. So bokashi is a way to compost indoors. Again, it's a smaller amount. The difference between this and a worm bin is that this is going to be anaerobic. So this is kind of like fermenting your food. So this is a bucket. You push all the material down into the bucket. You sprinkle it with a culture, a bacterial culture, and that starts to ferment the material. The nice thing about this is that you can have it indoors. There's no smell. You can put meat in here. You can put bones in there, and it will melt through that. And the material that comes out at the end of it is more like a fluffy, you know, like a cake mix almost. It's lighter in color. It's just more bacterial than something like a worm bin, so it's not going to be quite as dark. One thing I did actually want to mention here on these is when you're harvesting the compost, a lot of people don't know how to harvest it. There's a method called the cone method. So basically what you're going to do is dump the compost out, and then you're going to make a cone, a high cone out of it, and then just leave it for 20 minutes in the sun, and all the worms will crawl down to the bottom to get away from the sun, and then you just keep carving off the top, and then you just keep building your cone and carving it off the top until you have just debris left, and then you would start your bin over again. So always make sure you're starting your new worm bin nice and clean and fresh. And
What if it's winter time?
for the worm bin?
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing it right, you can bring this inside. But again, it is only a liter a week, and if you cook a lot of fresh foods, you're probably going to use a lot more than a liter a week. But if you're a single person or you live in an apartment, the other thing you can do is just put some padding around it to keep it warm. Ideally, the worms like it at about 20 to 24 degrees if you can keep it that way. So if it gets too cold, they'll freeze and die. So then you just need more worms. But you can bring it indoors. This is also a great book. When I started this in Vancouver, they had a training course, and they gave us this book with it as well, Worms Eat My Garbage. And it gives you more information about worms than you probably ever wanted to know. But it's good to know how they procreate and things like that. How many people have this one? No, it seems like maybe you guys are in the 3-bin method or something. So I call this a tall boy. Some people call it the cone. What I like about this image is it does show you your layers, right? So it shows you clearly that you need all these layers, and every time you're doing carbon, nitrogen, and then turning it. So these are really nice. They're black. They absorb the sunlight and the heat. Mine is frozen solid right now, like yours probably is, and it's full up to the top, so I can't wait for it to get warmer. These ones, you harvest the compost from the bottom. So the downside to that is if you've got a bad back, getting down into that, it can be quite awkward because you have to get down into the back corners and everything. I mean, you can take the top off if it's all. You should have 2 or 3 of these really, because once one is full, you're going to need to go on to the next one, and that one's going to be needing to do its thing. So ideally, you've got 2 or 3 of these. And then once you're done, once this has been in there for long enough, a few months, and you're ready to screen it, then you're just going to want to put it through a screen to get any of the larger debris that hasn't broken down completely. And then you've got a finer material that just works into your soil a little bit better. You don't have to. I mean, I know a lot of people just dig trenches in the garden and throw their food waste in there and bury it. And I mean, that's a form of composting too. But it's just making those nutrients available to the plants a little bit easier if it's already been, processed through a composter like this. And these ones actually, the regional district does give a rebate on these right now. So if you don't have one and you want to buy one, you can get $30 back from the regional district. You just have to keep your receipt.
What is a vermicomposter? Is that the one?
That's the worm bin, yeah. So vermiculture is worm composting. This one is called a tumbler. This particular one here is a Jora, it's a brand. This one is a steel drum, so they do make tumblers that are plastic. This particular one, you can see here, it's very well insulated. So these ones will stay warmer, and this one also has a dual chamber. So you fill this side, once this is full, you start filling this side. By the time this one's full, this one should be done. And then you just pull this down, you put your bin underneath, and it's nice and easy for harvesting your compost. The downside to these ones is they're quite expensive. These ones are $700 or $800. That's for the steel one. So this type of thing might be good for you know, a low-rise building with 6 to 12 units maybe, where people are putting their stuff in. But then you would need somebody in the building that's, you know, the manager of the compost, because it will need to be taken care of. And hopefully there's landscape to put the finished compost on. And this one's lockable as well, so good for keeping pests out. These can dry out if you don't remember to put water in it, so you just need to make sure that you're managing it well. You know, you do need to have a good moist environment, but not too moist, because if it goes too moist, then it's going to switch over to the anaerobic. That's when you start to get the smells.
Are they more rodent-proof than the other ones?
Yeah, these ones definitely are. They can't really get in there. Yeah, it's pretty secure. And they have all different sizes of these as well. Yeah, exactly. For turning it, you just do this and it's kind of fun versus this, which is not so fun. It's true, yeah. So that's why I like to, you know, I like to promote any type of composting that works for you. I mean, there's not one way to do it. So it's experimental. Figure out what works for you. This is one of my personal favorites, the 3-bin system. I think every single family home should have one of these if you've got room for it. Reason being, all of these slats come out for ease of harvesting. You've got your first section here where you're adding all of your new material. So you can see these are actually chicken wire or mesh on the outside, because you do want the airflow getting in there, but you do want to keep the pests out. This one has a nice lid, because if you don't want too much snow on top of it, the snow is going to melt and then it's going to get wet and sloppy. And so this one just controls if you're in a very wet, rainy environment. If you're in an extremely dry environment, you probably don't need the lid, but it's a good option to have if you're going to build one of these. And you can make these out of upcycled materials, or just, you know, chicken wire, you know, pallets, or you can use beautiful fresh cedar if you have the budget for it. So basically you fill this one up. Once this one gets, you know, to about here, then you're going to fold all this material over into the next one, and you're going to let that sit. And now you're starting to fill this one. Once this one's full, then this material should be ready to be screened into here, and then this is your finished compost pile, and then you start all over again. So
Still turning those as you go as well, right?
in a perfect world, every time you're adding food waste, you're giving it a bit of a turn, yes. And then when you move it over here, that's a turn. But yeah, I mean, if you've got a pitchfork and you can fold some dead leaves in every time, or some straw or something, that'll really help the process. Yeah, and then you can also just make a screen that fits perfectly over here, and then you just shovel it over and then just let it fall in there, which is really nice.
So it's not, I can't really see on the back of it, it's all chicken wire?
It's just chicken wire. Yeah, it's all chicken wire on the sides except for the front. Yeah, and there's designs for these online you can find. So, and we built one of these at Nisconlith Band last summer. So these are also really good for community gardens. This is a perfect size for a community garden if you're doing that. If you were doing something that was public like that, I would make little signs and just letting people know where they are in the process. You know, put everything here, don't put it there. You know, if you see it's full, move it over, and just help people along. And then there's what we do at Spa Hills. So let's say you just create too much and you don't want to deal with it. You've got a big company and you just want to get rid of the material. That's where Spa Hills would come in. So we do a commercial food waste pickup service for businesses. We handle all of the Tim Hortons in the valley. We do grocery stores, casinos, hospitals, schools, treatment facilities, all sorts of different businesses. So we come once a week and we take the food waste away and we take it to our commercial facility in Salmon Arm. And that's where we have something called an aerated bunker system. I don't know if So what that is, it just looks like a barn, just looks like your average barn, but it's got 6 concrete lined bays in it, and we control the heat in that facility. So this is a government regulated facility. You have to go through lots of permitting and public processes to get one of these. So we've done all of that, and basically we're much faster. Because we control the temperature, we get it into that nice hot thermophilic range. We keep it there for the intended amount of time, about 3 days. Then once the temperature starts to drop, we flip it over into the next bay. It heats up again, and we do that 5 or 6 times. And then by the end, it's ready to be cured or finished. And then you basically just leave it sit for a while. And what that does is it cools down all the nitrogen. It can be quite a hot compost to begin with. So aged compost is always better. You should let it sit for, at least a few months before you put it on your garden. Otherwise, it's actually doing you a disservice because it's sucking the nutrients out while it's still trying to process. So you want to make sure it's aged for a little bit.
So that's the case with home compost as well?
If best practices would be to let it age for a little bit. So once you've done all your turning and you've screened it, just set it off to the side. Even if you leave it for a month or 2, it's better than putting it straight out onto the garden. But you know what? I mean, I put mine straight out too. So you do what you can, right? It's still better than nothing. So yeah, we do the big 3-yard dumpsters, or these totes here. We bring these lined with a compostable bag. The important part about the compostable bags is that they will only break down in a facility like ours. You do need a hot temperature to melt through those bags. So if you've been using those compostable bags and putting them in your home compost, you may find that they're still there. Eventually they will break down.
You shouldn't sell those little compost, because that's what everybody thinks, right? They can throw them in their home composters.
And if they're like me, I'm going to be doing a compost process that heats things up, and it probably will melt. The one method I haven't really mentioned here is if you're lucky enough to have the space for it, and you've been able to gather your carbons and your nitrogens separately, and you're going to build a compost all at once, then you're probably going to be getting up to a nice high temperature, and then it will work. So that's what I did in the fall, for example, is I had all my dead leaves and all the food waste. You basically make a big pile out of it, you water it down, you stick your thermometer into it, and then you just watch it, and it just heats up, and then there's steam coming off of the top. It's quite amazing. And you'll watch your pile just shrink. So for us at Spa Hills, it's about a 1-to-4 ratio. If we get a ton of food waste, we get about a 1/4 ton of compost out the back end. So that's how much it shrinks. We're out on Yankee Flats. Yeah. And what else can I tell you about that? We service everywhere from Sycamoose, Sorrento down to Vernon, but as of April 1st, we're expanding down into Penticton and Kelowna. So the business is growing in a very big way. Yeah.
I had a question about another thing I've done at my house. I have a lot of room, which a lot of us like in these parts we have. It's not so much you have to be tiny space gardener. So I try to let stuff sit, and then I'm really interested in the permaculture and doing seeing as little as possible as I can do. And oh gee, the lettuce seeds, fell and they sprouted, and now I have all this lettuce and I haven't done anything. So things like that. But an easy thing I've done, and I'm not sure what kind it is, if it's anaerobic composting, is I do kind of big plots of beds that I'll just grow stuff in. So I'll make one into where I throw all my waste, and there's a big mix of stuff, and I'm not very scientific about it, but I know there's a big mix. And sometimes just covering, you can cover with some plastic that won't degrade in a couple of seasons, and it really heats up hot.
Oh yeah.
It's under the sun.
Yeah.
Under the plastic, and then it seems like it's totally inoculated. After maybe a year or whatever, that it's gone through a whole summer.
Yeah.
You take it up, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So now, is that anaerobic compost?
No, anaerobic, you'll know it's anaerobic if it stinks.
Yeah,
So it's really the ammonia smell that you'll get if it's turned and gone bad, and that's when you definitely want to get some air into it and some more carbon.
So what do you think about that? Does that make
Well,
sense?
that's a method. I mean,
And
I would
just
probably
throw it
do
up and just
straw.
plant it?
Yeah, I would probably cover it with straw, and then when you're ready to plant, just pull holes and then just plant right into the holes right into it, because then that's just more organic material, and you're already mulched and you're good to go. So yeah, mulching is obviously hugely important here. Well, straw's organic. I mean, it's.
I mean, you could do the plastic for the summertime to do quicker is the thing for like a big thing that you're not turning, and then take it off and get ready to plant and put stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to cook your soil though too, right? It can get very, very hot. I mean, with a greenhouse, if you don't crack a window in your greenhouse, my greenhouse got to 60 degrees in no time at the seed swap. I was here last year and planted all my seedlings and then left to the seed swap for the day, and it was a sunny day. Learned that the hard way. Yeah, so you just think that's like a greenhouse in there. So you can cover it, but maybe just leave so that some air can get in a little bit, yeah. And if you bury it will also be better, because if you do leave those air holes, then you're inviting mice and other things to live in there. This is the finished compost from Spa Hills. This is now available for purchase in large quantities at Price Landscape in Vernon and at Blackburn and Salmon Arm. We also deliver it and spread it if you need it, or you can pick it up at our farm. And this is Class A organic compost, so it's safe for all of your edibles. And it is a high nitrogen compost, so just so you know, it's better to put on in the fall than the spring if you can. Otherwise, if you're going to get this on your ground this spring, do it immediately when the snow melts. So work it in early and give it time to yeah.
So they call it organic compost, but like you're taking food from Tim Hortons
Mm-hmm.
and like bananas.
Somehow that fits within the certified organic system because it's gone through that thermophilic stage, and I don't have the answer to that. But yeah, it is considered organic, but it's not all certified organic material going in.
The reason I'm asking that is because I compost the way you said. I couldn't believe you said it when you said that about the trench and putting your stuff in.
Because that's what you do?
Yes. I have a family, and that is really honestly like the easiest, like the best way for us, because I just out my garden door or out my kitchen door, I just have like a big tin, and we just put everything in there. So then I just say, oh, like on the job list, like just Samuel, just go and dump the compost. And so I always put it in there, and I have lots of friends and families who are just totally negative about that, like, oh, you're just gonna be feeding the magpies and stuff, and that's why there's so many. But when you just bury it like that, it's gone.
As long as it's capped, as long as it's got a cover of, either soil or carbon or hay or something, it's fine. It's when it's just exposed to the air that your problems come. But
Something like that's what I was saying like about grapefruit. So then when we till my garden in the spring, all of a sudden you got these brines and grapefruit, and I'm like, chill, like who cares? I said like, but then I started.
But it will make your soil more acidic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's just something to consider. And maybe you have alkaline soil and you need a little bit more acidity in there, but I would check the pH of your soil.
So I don't really care. I just bury it in there. Otherwise, and this is the other thing is I would like to tell more of my friends if you would do that, you would not have such stinky garbage, because that is the one.
That's the only thing that smells in your garbage, really.
My garbage never stinks.
Yeah.
Because you do not have any food in there.
Exactly. Yep. So the only in permaculture and more in regenerative agriculture, there's really a move towards no-till. So I don't know if that's something that you've all been thinking about or learning about, but trying to disturb that as little as possible. So certainly, blending in your compost to the first couple inches of your soil, great. But when we're digging trenches like that, there's a healing that needs to happen within the land as well. So if you can avoid that, I would say, and again, one of the permaculture principles is don't work so hard. And so digging is hard work. So you want to try to avoid that if at all possible. So yeah, I would just say make it easier on yourself. Or, the other thing that people do with their compost bins quite often is they put them way far away from the house, and you're not going to use it as much, or you're going to slip on the way out there and it's a hazard. So if you're doing it right, it shouldn't smell and it should be fine right beside your back door.
And they all wait for the perfect compost bin. Everybody says, I can't compost because I don't have the perfect bin. I'm just like, just start. Use an ice cream pail with a lid.
Start somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Even if it is digging a hole and throwing your food waste in. I mean, hey, something is better than nothing. So what you can do right now, just like we said, get a compost bin and get started. Learn the basics. There's a new book that just came out called Community Scale Composting. And it's like a textbook. So if anybody's interested in going much deeper into this, I'm teaching a 3-hour course at the college in Vernon on April 13th. So we're going to really get scientific and geeky about it if you're interested. But just your best tips, don't forget to add water, air, and carbon. Make sure that you're contacting your municipal council if this is something that you want to see and you have too much food waste at home and you want to get rid of it. They need to know that you want it. Squeaky wheel gets the oil. So right now the regional districts, all of them around here are talking about this. They have to be talking about this. All of the plastics that are now not being sent to China, we're going to have to keep here, and so we have to start thinking about compostable plastics, or reducing single-use plastics and using reusable. The convenience factor has gotten us down a dark road, and now we need to kind of reel it back in and ask people that you're patronizing. Ask those businesses, are they composting? If not, why? Do they know about this service? Do they know how important it is for water, land, air, and habitat? And then look for these businesses that are already composting. On the Spa Hills website, we do have a list of all the businesses that are working with us. So these are all people that have done it willingly. They weren't forced, well, except for in Salmon Arm, they were forced. There was a bylaw, and it is going to come to the regional district now, but I really appreciate it when somebody does the right thing because it's just the right thing, not because they're forced to do it by the regional district. So.
I have a very large pile of sawdust from a mill, and that would be fine in the compost.
Yep, it would be. The only thing to watch for with sawdust is that it doesn't start clumping on you. So you want to mix it in really well because it can start to form clumps and then it could start to mold. So just mix it in quite well. It's actually better to use a carbon source that has multiple sizes of material. So you've got chips like this and chips like this and some sawdust, and then that's got available carbon for all the different mouth sizes within your bin. So if you can find a mix, that's best to do. But absolutely, you can use it. Just make sure it's not treated wood. Yeah. Yep.
I was just going to mention about that I have a friend who's a tree feller, and so they take down dangerous trees and then they chip all this other stuff up. And I'm a little careful about where I put some stuff because some of it is like cedar or it's pine or this or
Yeah.
that. But he'll dump a big pile of something, and then I have it there, and it starts turning into soil all by itself eventually. But then I use bits of that on my little compost because I'm doing this sort of permaculture-y, have a big pile and just start planting in it and stuff. So you might find you have a wood chipper or someone like that who will just dump them because you're getting a tree removed and they have a lot anyway, or your neighbor is, or.
And they love you because then they don't have to make a special trip up to the landfill.
Yeah, because they have to figure out places to put all that anyway. So since I have a lot of space, I'm getting now things that have been there like a few years, and I'm like, oh, gee, I could just really just plant this, like throw in a few more things so that
Yep.
I have not just that tree, but.
Okay. So just one note on that, just a warning, and probably nobody's going to be doing this, but if you have a very large pile of wood chips, just be careful because at a certain size they can become combustible. So all of that carbon sitting there and heating up, it can explode on you. So it's really only if you have a big pile like this, which you probably won't be doing, but just in case, yeah, I'd rather just put a disclaimer out there. Also, some of those chippings, those are really fresh wood, and so that's going to actually tie up your nitrogen for a little bit. You want to have it a little bit aged if you can. Leave it out for a couple weeks till it dies, and then mix it in. Yes.
So what can I do to increase levels of potassium and phosphorus in the compost?
What are you putting in it currently?
Well, I put everything in. I'm just saying that a main product is nitrogen.
I mean, with anything, I mean, and this is sort of across the board in your life, in your diet, in your compost pile, diversity. The more diversity that you can put in, I mean, if you're eating the same 5 foods every day and putting that in, you're really going to limit the nutrients in your compost. So, make sure I mean, if you're vegan, obviously you're not going to use eggs, but maybe you know somebody that does, and you can get those and put those in there for your calcium. You can add amendments to your compost if you like, or you can add it, mix it in with the compost after it's done and then put it on your soil. But banana peels are great for that, that type of thing. So just, mix it up. Just make sure you've got a good.
You're adding organic matter that already has
Exactly. Yeah, I'm personally a bit of a purist when it comes to compost. I don't like to buy anything to put in it, you know, like, just seems like a waste of money, so, yeah. Okay, last question.
I'm across from a high school.
Mm-hmm.
Trees all around the yard, and tons and tons of leaves. And I've been watching those, and I thought I can make use of those. So last year, I got about 10 wheelbarrow loads, just cleaned an area from here to the wall, very little, but I took those and I put them in my compost bin. And I'm a little bit concerned that they water their yard, and I'm wondering if there's fertilizer in that water.
Or pesticide or something like that.
Leach to my compost.
You know, ideally, obviously, if you can find leaves that are clean and haven't been coming from a sprayed tree. Permaculturalists are famous for trolling this town in the fall and stealing people's bags of leaves, and we've been keeping an eye on you all summer long to see if you've been spraying. And then we just come in the dark of night and take all the leaves. It's best to make sure that you've chopped the leaves or chipped them up into small bits. It's better if they're dead, as you may know, and I've learned the hard way as well. Putting green leaves into the compost creates just a wet mat in the middle, and then it'll go sour and anaerobic on you. So let them dry out and chop them up.
Secondly, we still have 8 to 10 inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to disappear. Leaves are still there. Can I use those, still use those
Yeah.
green, wet leaves?
It's better to use dry leaves. You'll have more success with dry leaves. So if you can,
Else they're not dry.
they won't, but you know what? There's little creatures living on the bottoms of those leaves, and that's their little home. So if you can contain yourself and just let the wind dry it, you know, I know we all want to get out there and rake right away, but try to let them sit for as long as you can bear it.
Well, there's 30 houses all the way around, and I'm the only one that takes the leaves.
Yeah, good for you. I know, there's kooks in every neighborhood. They're all in this room.
Looking out their windows, I knew I'm going to have competition.
Definitely, oh, one day I was driving by getting leaves, and as I'm sitting there, you know, getting the leaves, one of my friends drives, and she's, "Those are my leaves!" So thank you so much.